Okay, we're getting ready to cut our piston here, valve pocket. So we got the machine, so it just barely puts a little mark there inside the pocket. I don't know if you can see it in there, but so we got the piston all leveled out across this face. So everything's locked in now. So we're going to make a little trim cut, come down, just slightly hit it. I'm going to put this back at our 0 point. Oop, we're actually past our 0 point. There's our 0 point. Okay, let's crank this thing up, see what we get. Start hitting the radius in there where the valve was hitting. There it is. It's squeaking right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's half at 3/4 of a thou different than the other piston was that we stopped on. So we'll zero it right there. Alright, so this one's a lot closer to being level than what the other one was. So it looks like we're still a little bit off on our position this way by about a thou. The dome was within a thou all the way across the whole surface.
Yeah.
Alright, so we got our initial cut. Go ahead and move that up out of the way a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to measure to see how wide the valve it is cutting for is. So it looks like we're cutting for about 1/915. But this has a pretty good radius on the end of this bit in here. So when it actually gets out to that full bit width, it'll be more. Now I didn't really cut anything here, I just kind of skimmed the surface for cutting deeper. So we got to figure how much we want to go bigger than we are right now. So the valve is 1/950. So I'm not sure how deep we are into this right now. That dimension is going to be hard to figure out because as we make this bigger diameter, that would change.
It just barely got rid of that little...
No, it's still in there because this cutter's not flat. I actually have to feed it out. So I can feed into it coming in, and then when it's not going to chatter going in. The problem is we don't know exactly how big this thing is set up. We were trying to figure that out before. What did we come up with in our
180.
this deal here? Well, that's kind of hard to tell too because the red is past the radius.
So we lost our reference point.
Yeah, I got to mark that a little bit so I can not scrape off the ink. Now I get something to work to. Pop this thing out of gear. It's nice and dark on my side. Yeah, it's about 180. pretty close. I think we're pretty good on that dimension. So how much more of that radius is going to cut out than we can look at? Quite a bit more from your angle?
Yeah, probably. Oh yeah, quite a bit.
30 aside?
Yeah, at least.
Say 30 would get us to close to what we're after.
Because once it gets all the way out there, it's quite a ways over there.
Yeah. It's just I don't want to cut it much more than the valve size because we're going to make it really thin through here, and that's where the piston's going to blow out. So I'm going to put that extra 20 back in that we didn't take out before. That was leaving. So now we're on 0. So that's going to cut 20 deeper into there with the same number up there. Yeah, clunk, clunk.
Clunk, clunk.
So I'm going to go back up, drop back down at that number, and then I'll stop and I'll come back out and I'll feed it back in. Do a sweep across here. And I think we'll drop it about, I don't know. Until I make the pusher, I don't know how bad this really is. I'm going to give it about 10 just to kind of see what it does and get it squared up, and then I'll come back and measure our numbers. I don't want to cut any more than I have to. Okay, so this one's at 0, so we overran on that. Two turns down. Wrong direction. The handle on 0. Let's bump it. Should cut. All right. Yep, too deep. 0?
Yep.
Am I hung off still? Maybe that's a problem. We have a little clearance in here still. And I cut where I didn't want to. Okay, so we wasn't quite there yet. Actually, what did I go into that about 10 before? No, I went to 20, the diameter change.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, let's try this again. This time I'm going to mark it so we can see what we're doing. That helps. Three extra.
Wasn't one?
Somebody didn't put that in the right spot. Geez, it's not even midnight yet. No wonder things aren't working. Now zero works. Yep. And that's one thou. Should clean all the way across. Yep. Alright, so except for that screw up I put in there, pretty close. There's our valve size now. Okay, we're showing our 950 now, because we're coming up in the radius slightly. Okay, I'm going to go down my, I think I'm going to give it 15. Right there. That's not going to kill us to being too deep. Just as a reminder. Alright, that's enough for doing a mock-up with now. Where's my numbers at? Okay, I'm measuring 980 right now on the valve, so we should have a good amount on the level. This has a little bit of chamfer in it too, so should be able to do what we need to using that. So now the valve should have some clearance in there. Not much.
Just enough.
I only went in 23. A little bit that way, but I'm being kind of generous. I think it's pissing the lid very long anyway. So. Alright, so I'm going to take this out and put back the motor back together and do a mock-up.
Okay.
Alright, we're working on push rods now. So these are some raw stock here. Got these from Crower Cams. So these are, for some reason they thought I wanted some top fuel push rods. So these are 125 wall, 7/16 heat treated chromoly. And then we got some ball tips here to put in the ends of them. So after you cut it out for this, we'll have 80 wall where that goes in. So I'm thinking about maybe taking this hole right here and opening it up a little bit. At least going in a couple of 2-3 inches in, whatever I can do with a drill. Lighten them up a little bit. Things are heavy. So right now I'm going to go ahead and cut the end of this off and see how hard these things are to cut. We'll see what heat treat really is. And the file cut it, so that means I got something to work with. So basically I got to make this push rod here 1/2 inch longer. So there's your bowl there. So we gotta cut off a little bit. So we gotta cut off 400 thou. Gotta cut about that much. Looks like about 5 inches this has to go away. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and experiment with this a little bit. And obviously I got 5 inches to play with. So I'm gonna practice drilling a hole and reaming it. So here's our reamer. And let's see if we can cut this thing and make it halfway decent. And if I get one of these put together without screwing it up, then I'll cut off the excess over here and we'll make a push rod made up. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, we're back on the push rods here. So this here is the tip here put in. So here's a long push rod here. It goes from right there all the way up to here, 14.5 inches. That's a pretty good length push rod. Might have made that one too long. Actually, I made this one. This is the first one I did. There's actually a gap between the. Whoop. There's a gap in here. I don't know if you can see in there, but there's a gap up in there, so it doesn't sit flush. So they're not sitting flush, it could break off, so we're not going to use that. So instead of just cutting it off and destroying it, I'll keep that, maybe I'll use it for a mock-up something down the road. So I went ahead and put another tip on this one. So now I got 2 of them here that are done on this side. All I got to do now is measure off the tube length, which is basically minus this adjuster here. So we just lay these all together down here in the common end. There's a common end right there. So you go like that. You add in the excess amount here that we want. And we figure out what our overall length is that we want, and that's what we cut these tubes to. So this is 9 1/4 inches tip to tip. Right in there. So to get that out of the way, we got to figure out where this one here is going to be 9 3/4. About like that. Oop. So it slid away. Roughly there. And then we just measure where we want to cut our tube at. Oop. Get it where I can see it. So anyway, I'll figure out that length. Basically, I'm going to measure the top of this with a caliper here. Oop, right over there. We'll measure how much this sticks up. Subtract that off of the length of what we got now. Come up with a length for our tubing, which is going to be from the end of the tube to the new end of the tube. Basically, that's the aluminum part on this one. So that length there. And we'll do the same thing on this one, figure out what it is, because these are different tips lengths, and come up with our push rods. If I do it right, we're going to come up with around 9/700 to 750 max. 3/4 of an inch. So that's what we're working on. So I'll go ahead and get this cut off, and we'll come back and show you how to put the ends in there. I got a fairly good setup for doing it. So yeah, continue on. Okay, I just figured out a way of measuring this to come up with an accurate measurement here. We put this one here on there. We come in here with our caliper here and measure it. We come up with 420 as the height of the ball coming off the shoulder. So we're going to have 2 of those here, one for each end. So we're going to take 420, 0.420, multiply that by 2, equals, so we got 840, and we want 9 3/4 inches because this push rod here was 9 1/4. We want a 1/2 inch more length for our plate. So that makes it 9 3/4. So we subtract this here from 9.750. It equal. So we want a tube length of 891. So basically 8.9 inches. So if I measure out my 8.9 inches here along my tube, it should be how much length we want. So 8.9 inches. Put this in tenths. that. You come over there and grab your edge. You get on 8.9 inches. And we cut it right there at 8.9 inches. Boop, right there. So I'm going to cut that in the bandsaw, and we'll come back and show you how to put the inside of it. Okay, I cut the push rod off. That's the piece left over. So, nice thick wall. So you can see how that comes out. A little bit over 9 3/4 right now. I'm about 30 thou long right here, so I got to trim it to fit. So cutting it off worked pretty good. And you lay that out just right. You can see it comes up with almost to 800 there almost. So I'll go ahead and trim this off and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, first thing I gotta do is trim this thing off. We gotta get this a square edge so I can measure from. So I know about 20 or 30 on the long side, hopefully. I'll go ahead and trim this to fit right now. First thing I do is square it up. Pull it out and measure it. Alright. That's the cut surface now. Pull that out. Come over here. Let's measure to see what we really got. Okay. So we'll line it up over here on our mark. Something close there. Yep. Move it over a little bit more. Recenter it. Okay. Now we come over here and see what we get on this side. We want 9.1 and looks like we're about 940. 935.40 right there. So we got to trim up about 35, 40 thou. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'll double check the measurement without the camera so I can see better. And I'll show you how to cut it. Alright, we're setting up to do our cut here. So right now we put the cutter right up against the edge of the push rod right there. We come over here and set our indicator, which is mounted on our table, the bed of the mill, or the lathe. And then we're hitting on a cross slide here, so as I move this back and forth, the needle moves. So, and I'll go ahead and cut it 35 thousandths off to 40. I think it's closer to 40, but so turn that on. We go over and touch it off. Hear it there. So you can see where the indicator's at right there. Looks like we missed it by just a little bit. Zero it. Go ahead and cut this off the number we want. So I'm going to take a 15 on the first shot. See how this works. 15 comes off pretty nicely. Give it another 15, so that's 30 total. Pulls off a nice tip there. We're going to give it 40. So that's right there is 40. Where I can see it. Oop, maybe where you can see it would help too, I guess. Alright, so we're on 40 or close enough. We come back and we do our cut over here again. I'm taking a 10. leaving a little bit of chamfer on the edge, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the chamfer and get the drill set up over here. I know I got the ream on the chuck back here, so we'll go ahead and change it out. Okay, we're going to do a step drill here. Now here's the chamfer right there. You can see it a little bit on the edge. Now, get over, you can see better. So right here is a chamfer. Get the camera to focus in correctly would be nice. So now it takes the sharp edge off right there. So we don't want to have any sharp edges on there. It kind of makes things hard on you when you work on them. So I'm going to go ahead and step drill it. So this is my first drill here. This is a little bit harder drill than this one. This one's a little softer. So this one here is one size. So we'll poke this one in. We'll go in full depth up to here. Then we'll swap over to this longer drill here, which is longer. And I'll put that all the way under the, right to where my thumb is. And then we'll come by with the reamer and we'll ream the hole the size. So the reamer's a 281, 32nd over a quarter. These ones here, I forget what these are. I think these are 1/4 inch here. I don't remember. Something. That's making us basic about 80 or 90 wall push rod, which is plenty adequate for this job. So yeah, go ahead and poke this out right now. It's hard material, so you got to drill it slow and keep it well lubed. See how hard it is? It's protesting already. Protest all at once, we'll have to keep cutting. Lube on there. Just keep steady pressure over here. Steady feed. Don't be jamming in and out, stopping. Keep pressure on it. Drills like having steady pressure on them. Tailstock back a little. We're running out of room. Really got so much travel on these things. So you go ahead and oil it up. Jam it in the hole. Re-lock down your tailstock. Catch some more. And I'm going to repeat this with the other drill over here until it's drilled. I'll come back and get ready for the reaming. Okay, we're up to the ream hole. I just started the reamer here so I get it going straight before I turn the camera on. So there's the ream hole up in there. I still got to put a chamfer on the outside edge and run it all the way in. I'm going to run it in the full depth of the reamer here. That far, so that's about 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches or so. Turn the speed down on the lathe a little bit. Reamers don't like going at high speed. So see it goes in there a little bit already. Go ahead and start cranking on in there. Same thing, using steady speed. I go in there about halfway and I pull it out and clean it, put some lube on it. You can start to protest a little bit there. When it starts to protest, that's a good time to stop. Take the ships off. Lube on that. Hole right there, and shove it back in. Well, run the rest away unless it starts to really protest like it is right now. Play it on your speed on your handle and back. Put a little more crank speed on my handle there. That helped calm it down a little bit. Okay, so you can see how to blow it up, blow it away. Alright, so there's your reamed hole right there. So I'm going to put a chamfer in there. So I'm going to use a center drill right here as a chamfer tool. So we'll just put this in our drill chuck and we'll go ahead and ram it into here. So let me get this swapped around, we'll come back. Okay, I got the center drill over here. So you can see how that's going to put a chamfer in there. You don't have to go very far to do it, just barely touch it. go back, see how much we got. See how there's not much of a chamfer there, so put it back in. A little more. It's a little better, but a little bit more. Make sure it's enough. I don't want to have the same problem on the other side. A little bit of chamfer, a little bit of chatter going there, but there we go. So we've got a pretty good chamfer in there now. So I'll go ahead and blow this thing off, get it all cleaned up. I'm going to run the reamer back here through the hole again just to make sure there's no burr in there, so when I press the tip in there, it goes in smoothly. So I'll do that and then I'll clean it up. Okay, whoops. Oh, that was clean. Sorry, it fell right on the tip, so we're okay. So we're here on my nice thick table here. So it's an 1.5 inch steel plate. Nice and solid. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep from screwing at the tip like I just tried doing by dropping it. I'm using a 3/8 nut. These are 5/16 balls on the end of these push rods. So I take a 3/8 nut. It fits right in there nicely. You put a washer on top of that, and then that's what you got to stand the bead against. So when this is all in there, whoops, falling everywhere. The washer hits up against the end of the push rod there on the shoulder, and then the nut holds it up off of the table. So you can see how the ball is recessed inside the nut, so it's all protected. So when I was beating the push rod in the first time, I did it like this, here against the table, and I took my hammer right there and beat it up here on the tip. So this one here is a, what's this, my 2-pound hammer, pound and a half hammer, I think, ball peen. Okay, now to do the other side here, I'm going to do the same thing. So now I got a different nut, another washer. It's the same thing, this sits up on top of everything like that. So I'm going to lay this side down here against the table. I'm going to take the other side here, flip it over with the nut and everything up on here, and I'm going to hit on the end of the nut onto the table. And that'll shove the tip into the end of the push rod there. So I'm going to put this up on my tripod so you can see it as I do it. Okay, try to have this where you can see as much as possible. So here's the tip we're putting on, it's right here. So we're going to we'll get our tip here on the table, on top of our nut. So we take our washer and nut on the other side. That's one we're going to beat against. Get on the flat part of the table. I hold the nut and wash with my fingers without hitting them with a hammer. So we just give it a good hit. You hear it went in there. So one hit, you can see it went in there, and see it's going in nice and straight, not sideways. So just give it a couple more hits. Just hit it square and flat. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's against the table now. I give it 3 or 4 small ones just to make sure it's seated. And I'm rotating the push rod as I'm doing that. That way any shock from the hammer should be taking care of it. So now we have, this tip is in, and this one here was the other one that was in there already. So now we have a custom length push rod that should be 9 3/4 long. So we'll go measure it and see how close we got it. You know, that's how you beat them in there. Okay, I got my measurements here. So we're up against the backstop there. And over here you can see what it came up with. So for some reason we came up off, I'm not sure why. But we're down here around 715, maybe 720, right in that area. Not sure where the air came from, but oh well. No biggie. I'd rather be a little bit short than long. If it's too long, it won't go in the hole. So anyway, effectively, you only have to move the adjuster up another 30-40 thou, which is only a turn and a half, so big deal. I'll try to make the other one slightly longer, so it'll be closer to the 750 number, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and try putting this in the bike and see if our length is going to be too long or too short. If the length is good, I'll duplicate it. If I want a little bit longer or shorter, I'll adjust. But the motor's mocked up right now, so we can check all that. So I'll go over here and see what we got. There's the motor. So with a longer push rod, you can see how it's way long. You can see how before I used to cheat by cutting and notching it. I need a shorter push rod. Okay. Get up in our hole up there. And you can see how we're going to have a problem with this motor. So see how this push rod is going to be way too long, see? So I need to make this thing a lot shorter. See, right now we can't get it to go in. I got the valve spring open right now, but see how it drops down? So we're about 50 thou longer than it needs to be. Even with my notch in there, it doesn't quite work. So it's going to be pretty hard to put this together. So let's go see if the intake is going to be the same way. I doubt if they're equal. So let me run this nut down, we'll come back and check. Okay, well, one of the problems I had, I didn't have the crank at top dead center over here, feeder rod. One advantage with one cylinder missing, you can see stuff. So this lifter is actually opened up slightly, but it's still a little bit on the long side. I'm still about 20 thou more than it can be to fit in there, but it's a little bit closer. So you can see it's close, but not quite going to go. So, but this one here, you can see how it's way on the long side. So we're not even close on this one. So this one could be a lot longer than this. So I'm thinking we're going to make this one an extra 100 thou or so longer. So obviously it doesn't have to be that way. This one's a little bit too long. And this one here can be a lot longer. So I think 100 thou would probably be just about right. So I'll figure another 100 on this one, on the next one. And we'll come back and see how it looks. See if we screwed it up or we did it right.